folks. Welcome to another episode of the Snowies Camping Show. Joined again by myself and Lauren. How are you going today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited today about today's episode.
Me too.
Before we jump into that, please subscribe to our show via YouTube, your favorite podcast app, and you can jump in on the conversation, give us your opinions on the Snowies Camping Banter Facebook group. If you're not already part of it, jump on, ask to join, and there's quite a community of people. We've got, I looked the other day and the numbers have increased significantly, so lots of chat going on there. Now today we have a guest and it's about tents, Cedar Summit tents. I've been playing with them recently. They've launched some new tents in the market. It's really exciting. I've pitched them. We've done some videos on them, and I'm not just saying this because I feel like we should say it or there's some agreement or anything.
We are unbiased, authentic product reviewers.
Yeah, and we do think highly of Cedar Summit products. And the tents are no exception. They pitch really well. We've got online someone to talk about that today. We have spoken to Cedar Summit previously about their sleep systems.
Yes.
We spoke to Dean from Cedar Summit. That was like 2 studios ago. We spoke to him about their sleep systems, which is another awesome thing Cedar Summit have got, not just sleeping bags and mats, an entire sleep system. But today we have on the line Ross from Cedar Summit. How you going, Ross?
Very, very well, guys. Yourself?
I'm well. You're joining us from what looks like the 2nd or 3rd floor in Perth there in Cedar Summit HQ.
SGHQ over here in Perth. Yep, top of the building, 3rd story here. Gloomy winter's day in Perth, so I'm rugged up.
At least you've got a window. We're in a little room. Well, we'll just call it the Snowies garage.
Snowies garage.
We're in an authentic garage where we've got a big TV. And
don't ruin the illusion of greatness.
Anyway, Ross, before we jump into it, a little bit about yourself, because I've known you for ages. You've been with Cedar Summit for a significant amount of time. So we're talking about tents, but firstly about you. What's your position in Cedar Summit and a bit of your background?
Yeah, so I've been with the business nearly 10 years now. My role at the moment is senior brand manager for the Cedar Summit brand, ultimately responsible for our sales performance, I suppose, but held a few different roles through the business on the road, visiting guys in Adelaide and West Australia. And having been here 10 years, seen a lot of change and working in a lot of areas. I suppose my background, I did a degree in outdoor studies many moons ago, and I always tell people there was a lot of outdoors and not a lot of study. But it was an important sort of starting point for me. You really get to appreciate quality gear and what's valuable to you when you're in some pretty harsh environments. So yeah, a bit about me. And
so from that that sort of degree, I mean, is that like a liberal arts or international relations where it's like great in theory, but when you come out of it, there's not a huge amount you can do with it?
I think perhaps how you apply yourself afterwards, Lauren, may determine your future. But it's a pretty broad spectrum, and you're not far from the truth, though.
Right.
For me, it went into retail, so selling the gear that I was very passionate about, and having then moved across from the UK to Australia in 2010, finding my way in Perth to Cedar Summit was felt like an inevitability. Yeah.
Is that like, so Cedar Summit is quite a significant brand in Australia, I would say, especially in the outdoor adventure space. Is there an equivalent in the UK?
There's so many brands globally.
Yeah.
I think we're slightly different here in Australia geographically. We're so remote that you probably see slightly more Australian dependent brands. When you've got somewhere like Europe, it's all so close.
That's right.
It's not hard for a brand to jump borders, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it does.
We're going to have a bit of a deeper dive into a bit of behind the scenes with Cedar Summit
at another episode.
So we won't get too deep into those questions because I've got loads to ask. So just making sure you stay on task here, because I want to talk about we got the products. Hopefully you can see them on the screen there, but on the side,
on the bit of edge,
there's the tents in the range now are your new Alto and Telos tents, and there's a few different versions of them. This is the bike pack version here and some hike versions over there. And I think on the wall behind you there's a taste of maybe what might be coming.
And the Ikos Tent, don't forget about that one.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, sorry, right.
Yeah, pay attention.
Okay. Wow, roles are reversed today, aren't they? Crikey, Benji. That's a Vegemite this morning.
No, so Cedar Summit, I don't think you've ever done tents quite like a dual skin tent like this before. You've had single skin tents in the past, but give us a bit of a rundown on Cedar Summit's history in the tent category.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we think back to our brand and where we've come from, we're very much and we talk about it here, an accessories brand, the dry bags, the stuff sacks, your microfiber towels. For us, we've always consider it to be a sort of a shelter category with our tarps. You alluded on it a little bit when we caught up separately, specialist shelters that we've created in the past. In the last sort of 10 years, we've really developed into more of an equipment brand, and aforementioned sleep systems, our sleeping mats, our sleeping bags. And so to have that sort of solution for someone when they're outside in their next adventure, tents was probably inevitable that we'd be entering that space. So a bit of experience in dabbling in the past, but you're right, Ben. Yeah, this was a first foray for us, and it rounded out a solution to take into the wild with you.
Is there any consideration that you make as a brand when you look at the existing market and you think, man, there are so many excellent brands out there and so many awesome tent options, whether or not it's actually worth breaking into that space?
Yeah, for sure. Every time. I mean, any product, any category that we think we might want to delve into, and the guys work on this all the time. Market research, looking at what's out there already is absolutely critical. Roland, our founders, talked before, we never make a Me Too product. But if there's challenges, if there's frustrations with what's out there already, or a solution that we think hasn't been found yet for a particular problem, that's what gets our design team excited. For us with tents, it was no different.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I personally haven't had a play with the tents yet, like Benji has for the reviews, where he's obviously, set them up and been in and out of them and whatever. But just seeing them packed up in the office, when I first saw them, I was like, what's going on here? And it didn't strike me at first that these were the new tents, because visually, straight off the shelf, they look so different and they're so cool and they look so innovative in just how they're packed, and 99% or 100% of all other Cedar Summit gear, they're just so considered. And that's what I really love about Cedar Summit, is that if you're someone who does use a lot of equipment, or you have been around the traps a lot and you've done sort of different outdoor adventures and things, a lot of the time there's gear that you have and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be great if it had this? And almost every single time when I'm using a Cedar Summit product, I think to myself, wouldn't it be great if it had this? And then I go to sort of use it the way I intuitively would use it. And it's like, that is already there. It's very, very cool. So yeah, these tents are very exciting. I
think there's only a handful of brands when they create something that you really stand up and think, I really want to have a deep or close look at these, because quite often it's like you said, Ross, it's a Me Too product. If it's a dome tent or a tent with a similar frame, it's kind of the same thing, and they've thrown a few of their own little features in there, and it pitches the same, and it kind of does the same job. But when Cedar Summit said they were making tents, I certainly stood up and thought, well, this will be interesting, because we know it's not going to be a Me Too product. And having set them up, Lauren used the word before, considered. Everything is considered, down to the things that you put the pegs, the anchors for the pegs, and how the fly clips to the inner, and all of those things. And the videos that I did ended up being really long, not because I was trying to say a lot of stuff, but just at every point I'm stopping a videographer saying, you've got to show this. This works. Like this is just really smooth. And look, and you pitch the vestibule out, and the fabric's tight on both sides. You're not kind of moving, like it's just made really well. So
I'm realizing that we've got Ross as a guest on to talk about his tents, and we're just doing it all for him. But before we move on to delving a bit more into the development process, for you guys obviously not having made tents before like this, where do you see yourself now breaking into the market in terms of other key brands?
Yeah, it's a good question. We know we're operating at the top of the pyramid, if you sort of think of it that way. That's really where we are for our brand. So tents is no exception. We're making the highest quality lightweight tents, ultralight tents, I should probably say, that we think you should buy. That's where we operate. So there's some decent brands there for sure. And as we talk a little bit more about some of the features, we'll talk to you about how we approached it differently, and some of the challenges that we've noticed that we wanted to fix in how we've designed and brought this product to life.
Okay.
Well, let's
awesome.
jump into the features. So I think we've noted here it's like 2019 or something. You had your like your specialist solo and duo. They were single skin, really lightweight tents. So there's quite a gap between then and now between having tents as a core part of your range. Is that because the process takes so long? And let's sort of start to talk about your design process, I suppose, from there.
So I must admit, Ben, I had to do a little bit of research before jumping on. So the specialist is about 2010, 2011. We brought it to market.
Okay.
And we continually say shelter because it was very niche. It was a product that was fantastic for a small amount of conditions. Commercially for us, it wasn't very viable. It was quite expensive to manufacture. And I think 2019, the date that you have, is probably when the final one
that was the last catalogue it was in, yeah.
There you go, nice.
They're actually my monitor risers, the old Cedar Summit catalogue, so I was like thumbing through them. Anyway, go on, sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. I think for us, it's so important to allow innovation within a design process. To try and squeeze too much in, you can compromise on you miss out on something because you're trying to do too much at once. So we really sort of parked the concept of shelters for a few years. We focused in other areas. Sleep systems, as you can see and talked about already, was a big area for us. So we really came back to shelter story and a tent story it will be sort of probably around the 2019 mark, but our design team are really working 2-3 years ahead of what you actually see on the shelf of your store and what people have in their hands now.
So how does that even I guess how do you even start to develop a product? Like what are the sort of the first few steps there? Because
you guys don't just go to a factory and say, we want one of those in a different color. Like it's a totally, I'm making an assumption here, but it's a totally different process for you guys. It's from the ground up, right?
100%. It really is. It takes into account so many things. And it's looking at market research. It's looking at what's out there. Problem solving is just such a massive part of what we do. New material development and fabrics that didn't exist 20 years ago become available, and we then sort of go, how can we use that? What product can we put that into to solve a problem that wasn't solvable in the past? Or is it just a simple design tweak that makes this product stronger and still make it lighter weight? So there's a lot of problem solving and a lot of conversations first before we then start sketching concepts, sketching ideas. So for us tents, there's a lot of that. What's out there already? Where do we want to play? Is it developing a 4-season alpine tent, or is it more of a carrying it yourself freestanding model? And we have all these considerations. We end up then with a brief, I suppose, given to our design team. Keep them a little bit within some boundaries, but give them enough scope for innovation.
Yeah, cool.
So you're, you've talked a bit about focus groups and things in terms of your product development. Do you, I had a thought and I've forgotten where I'm going with it. Right. So obviously, as we talked before about how things are considered, your gear demonstrates that it's being designed by people who actually use it. Is that a fair call to make?
Yeah, massively. Our design team are consistently out of the office, which is great, both for them and also for the product that they deliver too. And we've got a pretty active crew here. And of course, moving forward, modern world, we work with ambassadors. We have athletes around the world. And for us too, being a global brand also really helps because you get insights from absolutely everywhere. West Australia is, West Australia. We can test products to some pretty harsh conditions.
Yeah.
But the hills behind me are about the tallest that we've got, and you don't see snow on them.
Yeah.
So it's important to take our products to different areas and really collaborate.
So
I heard you starting to talk and I was like, I've already talked a lot.
Talk about timelines and stuff. Do you want me to jump onto that, or have you got a question beforehand?
No, that's okay. I was basically going to ask a similar thing.
All right. So there's obviously a process from your market research, design team, get it. There must be prototypes and then there must be testing there. Well, I know there's testing there because you guys test things to the nth degree before it hits the market. And then finally it goes out to the market. Now the tents sort of went to market and then there was a bit of a delay and now they're wholly available now. But what sort of time frame is there? Well, let's just talk about the tents. Obviously a X bowl is going to be a shorter shorter process than tents. But
you think so?
Oh, really? Maybe not. So with the tents, like how long was the whole process of from idea, or yes, we're going to do this, to all right, now we're ready to hit the market?
It's a bit of a balance for us too, because you could spend so many years continually trying to tweak, but by the time you come out the other end, the technology that was fantastic when you started is already out of date. So, you want to take enough time, but not too long. So for us, from start to finish was probably about 2.5 years for tents. But there was no distractions either. So it allowed the guys to just focus on tents. And when we're talking about, why it's taken us probably so long to enter the market, it's because we knew when we did it, we wanted to do it right. So probably about 2.5 years. And Ben, you alluded to it already, but supply chain complications that the world is very much aware of. When you're making high quality product, very technical, you need a certain quality of labor to be able to manufacture, and then high quality materials to go into it. The tent industry was heavily impacted. So while we launched the tents globally in 2021, we really haven't had a consistent supply until the start of this year. So bit of a shame, but such is the nature.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say people don't often consider that it's not just the manufacturing of the final product, it's also the manufacturing of the materials and then the supply of the raw materials to make the materials that you like. It's a very big domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it leads me on to a question about manufacturing and factories. There's always the talk about made overseas and made in Australia, which is a topic we've talked about in the podcast now. But to make a high quality tent, you must have factories that you work closely and have a large amount of trust in to produce the products that you're going to send out to your consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. Tents is quite unique in itself too. It's when you're dealing with such lightweight materials, stitching, sewing, that sort of part of the process is incredibly precise. Small errors will quickly get found out when you're using product in the wild. So yeah, we absolutely work with the best out there, and honestly, a lot of other brands do too. When it comes to then other components, be it the poles, and this would probably be a nice segue for us. We partner with DAC. They're a South Korean aluminium company. They are the best in the world. Totally global leading sort of ability to extrude aluminium and create tent poles that are used by a lot of other brands.
Yeah, like Helinox chairs, for example, which are amazing.
So you teamed with a designer, Jake La, I think the name was, from Helinox for the design in these tents. That's correct, isn't it?
It's close. So Jake is the owner of, the founder, I should say, of DAC.
Oh, sorry, DAC.
Okay.
No, I said Helinox, didn't I? I meant DAC, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So Jake, so this was an interesting one for us. It's a bit more of a collaboration from the outset. So we, as a design team, came up with some concepts and things we wanted to improve. And again, we'll come on to these. The actual architecture of the tent, however, came from some ideas and conceptualization from Jake himself. And it was kind of a match made in heaven, because his architecture, which is the tension ridge that we have on our tents, really enabled the features and the benefits that we wanted to bring into a tent as well. So real collaboration on this project.
So that's the name that's stamped on the tent, that designer. Yeah. Sorry.
So why, let's talk about these aluminium poles versus, say, some of the other higher end tents on the market that use carbon. Mm-hmm. Why did you guys go with the aluminium?
Yeah, so aluminium for us, strength is massive. It's important. You still need flex in a tent pole, of course, but you need an element of rigidity too, so your tent can keep its structure. Carbon is a little more flexible. The biggest thing is that if you have a failure of a carbon pole, it is catastrophic to your tent. That is not field repairable. That's doomsday sort of stuff. And then finally, too, a benefit of carbon, of course, you think about ultra lightweight, but because we're partnering with DAC, global leaders in extruding ability of aluminium, the weight benefit isn't actually that significant. So pretty easy decision in the end. And yeah.
So just ultimately weighing up the pros and cons, and with current technology around aluminium, I would say the leading pro for carbon is often weight. And if that's not that much of a consideration, the cons become the balancing factor. Okay, interesting. So Go on.
How about this segue too here with the carbon pole breaking, aluminium pole being repairable in the field? They all come with a little repair sleeve. So how much did field repairability or field maintainability come into the whole design process?
Yeah, it's important in every product. A sustainable product is one that lasts and one that can be repaired as well. That's important for us. So, a pole sleeve. So if you sort of don't quite have the pole sections together, or you find a small break in the field, you can still repair that and use it. It also then, as you guys will, I know you can do yourselves, but really easy to replace a pole section when you actually then back home, or work with obviously us as the brand or your sort of retail partner to make sure that you have that service. So that's a really critical piece. Every tent also ships with repair patches too. And when we think about the materials, we'll probably talk about it. The materials that we use on a fly and a floor, the particular coatings that you have enable us or enable you, again, if you have a possum chew through your tent, or maybe a stick fall on it, or something more sinister, allows you to repair that as well in the field and get an immediate adhesion without having to worry about, getting through the night.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. So I want to talk a little bit more about materials. I want to go into your fly, especially with your more ultralight tents. But before we do that, your flooring. So, polyethylene versus polyester and things like that. Why have you gone with your polyester flooring?
Challenge it. We actually have polyether, which is pretty unique.
Okay, right.
I said that in the video and I thought that's different. But I'm interested in this answer. I'll let you talk.
So what you see with the polyether though is a coating. So nylons and polyesters, they're your two materials that you're playing with, right? And for us being an ultralight brand, we're delivering product that you're going to put in your pack. You want it to be lightweight. Nylon offers the best weight strength ratio. So nylon is commonly used as your foundation, I suppose, for a material. Challenges of nylon, abrasion resistance, UV, waterproofness as well. You still need to coat it. So we then have a balance of coatings that we use to deliver what we think is then the best, the optimum. And, for example, repairability is something that would come into consideration. Widely used coatings will be silicone. So you'll see SIL in the name. Silicone is hydrophobic. It's great at repelling moisture, gives UV protection to your nylon fabric as well. Also widely used is a PU, so a polyester urethane coating, which again helps to prevent the nylon from sagging too much when it's wet and provides, additional strength. A drawback of a PU coating is that it is susceptible to hydrolysis. So if you've ever had a tent and you've pulled it out after not using it for a few months and it's a bit tacky, it's a bit sticky, it might even have a pretty nasty pong. This is the coating breaking down on your tent, and ultimately it's nearly unusable after that point. We use polyether urethane. So polyether urethane is far more, it's not as susceptible to hydrolysis. It is more hydrophobic, and it's not been as readily available, and it's a little more expensive. So that's why we use it. It's a better product. It sort of it negates those downsides of hydrolysis while still giving us the benefits of giving structure to the nylon, not sagging. We still have a silicone coating as well for additional protection there, and durability in the long term as well. It's a real big win for us.
And so do you use that coating across the flooring as well as the fly?
Yeah, we use that on flooring and fly. Honestly, it was probably going to become more widely available and widely used. It's something that we jumped on as soon as we realised that there was a fabric out there that it ticked the box for us and met our criteria.
So I've got a question with that. Are you so you guys have a Cedar Summit factory, right? That's a dedicated factory. Are you relying on your people on the factory end to keep you up to date with that? Or is that part of your in-house product development team to have their finger on the pulse with these technologies?
A combination, but predominantly our in-house team. And we'll probably talk about it on a separate podcast. Yep. But, the breadth, I suppose, globally, the reach of our team means that we do tend to keep a finger on the pulse. It could be a textiles fair that we're attending in Europe to see the latest and greatest from a particular brand. We'll then work with those suppliers to bring it to, I suppose, a final place where it's all compiled and put together.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I should remember because I did the videos, but it's polyester floor and fly that you use on your tents. Is that right? It wasn't nylon. I think the inner was nylon.
So it is a nylon fabric.
Yep.
Treated, so coated with a SIL and PEU, polyetherurethane. So nylon, we'll always use nylon is just the strongest. Okay. It's the strongest for its weight. And so where weight is so critical for us, and this is the same for any other sort of premium ultralight tent, nylon's going to be the way to go. What treatments a brand then uses on the outside of that material is where for us it's a little unique that we're using PEU. A few others do. We're not the only ones out there, but for us, the benefits of using that material, we've spent a bit more using it. It's a win.
Okay, so I remember a question from the past where older tents before this technology, a lot of tents used a polyester fly, and the benefits they spruiked with the polyester fly was that it didn't sag, like you mentioned before, when it gets wet. Nylon is certainly stronger, more abrasion resistance, fine when it's dry, but as soon as it gets wet, it sags. And I remember speaking to people in shops many years ago saying, I woke up in the morning, I'm wet because their fly had sagged and they got wet inside. But what you're saying now is these coatings are largely overcoming that. So the benefits of nylon now are far outweighing the polyester.
Yes.
I just said that myself.
You did.
That was a rhetorical question.
Yeah. You just want Ross to go correct, Benji. Yes. Well done. Gold star. So back to the fly, something that I have come across a lot working in this industry is people who do purchase ultralight tents, potentially using it for one trip, maybe two max. Next time they go to pull their tent out, like you say, hydrolysis, delamination, tacky, a $1,500 tent essentially in the bin. I'm assuming having the polyether in and of itself doesn't necessarily offset that. How do you sort of recommend people care for their tents, especially between trips, to get the most out of the materials you're using?
Yeah, care for gear is really important, right? And sometimes it's easy to think if you're spending a lot more on something, then you shouldn't need to spend as much on caring for it. But I always think about if you've got a Ferrari in the garage, you probably don't leave it out on the street overnight. You probably take a bit more care in how
good point. Yep, absolutely.
And so for us, storing a tent, always want to be drying it out beforehand. Absolutely. Acknowledging full well that when you're out in the field, if you're on a multi-day hike, that's not going to be the option. That's okay. But as soon as you're home and you've got the capacity to do so, drying out the fly is really, really important. I'll segue slightly, I suppose. We have other accessories for our tents. I would always recommend someone uses a ground sheet. If they've got the capacity to add a few tens of grams into their pack, the longevity of the floor on your tent is going to be far improved. So
I always say it's cheaper to replace a ground sheet or a footprint than it is to try and replace a tent floor. Sorry.
Yeah. I have also heard that it's best where possible to keep your tent inner and fly in like a larger, say, mesh sack, for example, as opposed to in the original tent packaging. Is that something you would agree with your tents?
I think more so keeping it dry, far more important.
Okay.
If you're rolling it up in exactly the same way and packing it around, and you can imagine you're folding on the same crease consistently, then I would discourage people to do that. If you're stuffing it into the bag, so long as it is totally dry, then that's going to be absolutely fine.
Okay, cool.
Is that okay?
Sorry. I was just going to also add, if you did damage a component of your tent, it's another element of, aftercare, I suppose, is that us as a brand holding on to sort of spare parts that can be purchased. So, we haven't had a massive amount of stock in Australia in the past. As we now do, we will have spare components to, enable someone to purchase a new fly if they've had an accident, or an inner for a tent if, again, for the same reason. So that's just another important element to it, that the components can be purchased separately.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was almost going to say that before, as Snowies, we can vouch that investment in it. It's not the cheapest product by any means, but you're buying not just the product, but support
you're
for the product.
But you're investing in the brand
well.
for sure. Yeah. Do you guys offer a repair service, or is it more along the lines of here's parts for self-repair, or both?
A little bit of both, and we don't run repairs ourselves. There are some fantastic partners in the country, some of them also geographically closer to the majority of our population. So depending on the issue, we'll treat them on a case-by-case basis at this stage.
Okay, cool.
Should we jump into the tent range?
Yeah, I want to talk more about the range because I haven't had the fortune of, like you have, in actually playing with them. On paper and on your website, there's not really a clear difference straight off the bat between the Telos and the Alto. So can you run us through those two lines?
Yeah, and I might take one step back as well. We talked a bit about all the problem solving and what we wanted to try and achieve with these tents. We really boil it down, and like Ben's experienced filming the videos, you can continually find more and more features. Sometimes it can get a little overwhelming understanding where to start and talking about a product. We've really boiled it down to just sort of three things, and this was problem solving again. In looking at what was already out there. So the first of which was space, having a tent that had more space in it. You know, if you're having to hunker down or getting in and out of it, Ben, in your video, sort of how you get in and access the tent, space is critical. So height of a door and, just internal volume if there's a couple of you in there. So space was one. Ventilation is also really important. That's just a challenge of small, lightweight tents. Condensation can happen. So again, we've got vents in particular places, functionality to allow greater airflow. And then a final one being versatility. For us in tents, that's multiple pitch options depending on the conditions. We're blessed in Australia with some pretty nice weather a lot of the time. And so having a fly sort of partially open so you can see the stars, but then being able to quickly deploy should the weather turn is pretty important too. So space, versatility, space, ventilation, and versatility are the three things that I'll probably keep coming back to as I talk about some of the features on these tents.
Just quickly before we continue on, you mentioned before ground sheets as an optional accessory. That's one of the key accessories for that versatility.
It is a part of the versatility. I'd say it's the tents, and especially the Telos, there's a lot of versatility within that model, regardless of the ground sheet or not. More so for us, that's definitely just a value add for longevity of your tent.
Okay, cool. So you can, I'm assuming with all of the tents, you can set them up multi-pitch with just the ground sheet and the frame and the fly?
This is where we then change slightly between the models.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to answer as many of these the best I can.
Okay.
And I should have prefaced as well, as we're talking about the chemical compounds of fly materials. Hopefully there's not sort of engineers on there that will question me, but from an outdoor standpoint, I feel quite confident.
Someone will. It's all right.
Somebody probably will, but that's completely fine. And we both, Benji and I, often, acknowledge the fact that a lot of the time we don't really know exactly what we're talking about. We just do the best.
We just start the conversation.
And and we're happy for people to be like, that's a bit wrong.
I actually had
because we still learn. You know what I mean? We all learn.
I had to actually call you, Ross, while I was filming the videos for these tents at one stage to go, this doesn't quite seem right. Like, how does this work with the fly only setup? So, I'll let you talk about the details, but from my experience, they both work without a ground sheet, without a footprint, sorry, is what I was referring to. But they work better with a footprint.
Correct.
I'll let you talk about the differences between the Alto and the Telos there.
So fundamentally, freestanding or semi-freestanding construction. So what that means, a freestanding tent, which is the Telos range, you can get away without using any pegs at all. The tent will stand up by itself. This is ultimately a more popular style of tent. There's plenty out there that have that sort of structure and that style. So that's the freestanding element. And then we have the Alto, which is our semi-freestanding. So semi-freestanding, it needs some pegs, it needs some additional sort of tethering to keep it pitched and in its best position.
So people would go for the Alto, which is a semi-freestanding, over the Telos, just for the slight benefit in weight savings?
Yeah, so the main sort of architectural reason for one being freestanding and not is the amount of poles that we have in them. So poles go into each corner of the freestanding model. We have sort of three, I suppose, points of contact with the ground of our poles and the Alto. So you save a little bit of weight there. So the Alto model then comes in a 1-person and a 2-person. So that's our only 1-person option, because if you're buying a 1-person tent, weight is important. If weight's important, cool, we go for the semi-freestanding. And then in the Telos, the freestanding model, we have a 2-person and a 3-person model.
Okay.
And you also have a bike packing version of both?
Yeah, and I mean, within those as well, we also have a fabric and a mesh inner option. So hard, I suppose, to probably explain over a podcast and go through. It's a really important one to probably graphically see on a screen, the nuances between a hydrostatic head of a floor on one model or the grams that are increased by having a fabric inner versus a mesh inner. Benefits ultimately are slightly more insulation, so a little bit warmer by using a fabric inner instead of a mesh. I quite like the mesh myself. It gives me a greater visibility and improved airflow through the tent as well. So each model comes in a fabric and a mesh option. And like you said, Lauren, we also have a couple of bike packing options.
Okay, so when you are purchasing the tent, as obviously your whole tent, does it come with a mesh or a solid as the standard?
So we have a Telos and a Telos Plus.
Okay, right. So it's an option.
So that will dictate whether it's
So the Telos is the mesh.
I'm just thinking of other brands that I've been familiar with. You buy a tent and then there's a winter inner that you can purchase as an accessory, but as a standard it comes with like a summer inner or something like that. But
so the standard Telos or Alto has a mesh inner. The Plus has the nylon, which is a white inner for warmer. But then your bikepacking versions, which is this guy here.
Before we move on really quickly, I'm assuming that if you do choose to say buy the Plus, and then down the track you actually want the mesh inner, you can purchase the mesh inner separately?
It's something that we expect to be available. Honestly, at the moment, Lauren, because the tents, again, coming back to that sort of stock level, we haven't had a massive volume in Australia. We're going to sort of, again, case by case basis. It's not something that we publish on our website or, wholesale to retailers to offer as a spare part. We do have them though. So it's going to be a bit of a sort of learning curve for us in seeing whether they become a, visibly sellable item. Or
I do suppose potentially that would be more of a smaller number of the population, who would want something that fine-tunable. Bespoke.
Yeah.
But you and I are the same. Like we would both much prefer a mesh.
Well,
because we both like to have
ventilation
and the cold air on your face, and it's just so nice.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, I think I'm open to your opinion on this, Ross, but I think with a mesh inner, you get ventilation, so you can use it in pretty much all climates. In terms of stability, it's the same in the wind and the rain. You can still warm up a mesh inner with a good sleep system, but you can't necessarily, even though you have got extra vents in the nylon inner, the full fabric inner, you can't necessarily cool it down as much as you can a mesh. So I think if you're using it in a less versatility. If you're using it in a cold environment all the time, then a full fabric inner is going to be more beneficial. But if you're in WA, then you're probably going to be happy with a mesh inner.
Yeah, that's it, and that's where it's different climates here, and we're not too dissimilar to where you are, I suppose, in South Australia too. Different parts of the country, it might be a different consideration. Mentioned briefly before, we have slightly different thicknesses on the floor as well when you look at the Plus models, so that may be a consideration for someone. And as always, encourage them to look at the range and just to work out for their own personal requirements which one better suits their sort of typical conditions, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go into the bikepacking tent.
Okay, quickly.
Right. Sorry,
when you talk about the visual representation, check out the videos we've got on our product pages, because our videographer's done a really good job of trying to show the differences of what they look like. But yeah, the bikepacking version now.
I'm not a bikepacker, but I want to become a bikepacker now, just so I can justify buying this. But you see, the thing is, I don't think this is just version of the tent.
This isn't just for bikepackers, right? Because if you take the bikepacking specific elements out of this and just take the tent, I think it's 25 grams heavier than. So this is the Telos. That's the Telos. This is the bikepacking version. What's inside all those bags? Some people are
listening to this visually. We have listening to this through their podcast app. We do have some stuff on the bench in front of us.
So if you strip the packaging away from both Telos versions that we've got in front of us here, from what I saw, there's about 25 grams difference.
Yeah,
and I assume that's because the poles weigh a little bit more, because I'm I'm doing the talking instead of you here, Ross. But I'll throw to you now.
The sacks look like they're a bit more heavy duty.
Well, it's a heavy duty sack made for bike packing. But I reckon we might throw to Ross.
If you're not watching us on YouTube, they're boss.
Yep.
They just if someone says describe the new Cedar Summit bike packing tents in one word, it's boss.
They're really versatile. But I reckon if people are also not watching us, they won't see Ross sitting there going, "Oh, hey, I'm here. I can probably tell you about that." So why don't you tell us about the bike packing versions? Because I actually we did a quick video on this morning and strapped it on a bike, and it's not just for bike. It's got bike packing specific designs,
now, Ben.
but it's not just for bike packing. Anyway, over to you now, Ross.
I think you nailed it, Ben. There we go.
All right, let's move on.
So bike packing as a community and an activity in itself is something that it is growing a little bit, and we know that our products are used in that space. More often than not, though, you don't need to change a product of ours to become a bike packing product. So, a sleeping bag, a sleep system, the mat, the requirements are that it's packable, and we already have that. So that's already in place. When you look at a tent, however, a little bit different. And the main thing is the length of the poles. So the length of the poles all of a sudden becomes a little bit of a problem. Where do you store them on your bike? It's not easy. And so our bike packing model, that's the main difference to the product itself, is we have shorter pole sections. So visibly, when it's pitched, you would not be able to tell the difference. All of the functionality is exactly the same, but we've shrunk the length of the pole sections. And then from a storage standpoint, where would it typically go on your bike? We've put this parts of the tent into, as Ben's alluded to, some heavier duty storage cells, which they themselves come or ship with some of our stretch lock straps to clip easily to the forks of your bike.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go.
And it's like when we're talking about things that are, considered, it's like even the buckles on the sacks that the components of the tent go in have like Hypalon dust cover type things on them. So you're not smashing your buckles. And it's just, I don't know, it's just really cool.
These are all filled replaceable buckles and everything on here. These straps are really tough. If you do a bike packing and hiking, then this covers both sides of the story. There is a pretty cool feature with your hiking ones in that your storage bags then become storage pockets inside the tent. So everything gets used. There's no things apart from a bag of pegs that you don't use.
You're not got a random storage bag that you forget about that blows away in the night and you can't find it the next day.
Everything's used, but these are slightly different. They don't clip in as storage bags, but everything's considered. There are, if you do a bit of bike packing, then the bike packing version is going to cover every element. Now, have you got any more questions on those, Lauren?
Well, so talk us through not your bike packing version, but your standard Telos and Alto. Talk us through how they're actually packed, and everything that's sort of considered in what you're looking at when it's a fully packed product there.
Yeah, Ben's already alluded to it, I suppose. We have, again, when you develop something or you have an additional feature, you naturally then need to come up with a name for it. So our fair share distribution system, I suppose. two really nice sort of stuff sacks, one for the inner, one for the outer of your tent. So easy to distribute amongst you and your camping partner, which then stow nicely, clip together and secure the poles on the pegs and poles, I should say, on the outside. So visibly and as a package, sits nicely, of course, on your shelf, but easy to also store in your shelf in your garage at home. So that's how you see it. Easy to distribute, say, amongst two people. And then each of those serves a purpose when you come to pitching the tent at night. Pockets, and you'll see in Ben's videos, the Lightbar that we have that sits inside. It's always finding that additional sort of feature or that additional sort of use for something, which is quite typical Cedar Summit.
And I think it's also cool if you've got that multi-pitch option. If you're hiking in terrible weather and you've got a soaking wet fly and you're taking down your inner, then a lot of the time people's only choice is to really sort of stuff the fly as best as they can and draw cord it to the back of their pack or something, because they can't pack it with the tent because they're going to trash the tent inner. But you've got these two separate things here, which obviously takes that into consideration as well. But I want to know, there's like this super bougie feature that
Bougie.
you've got here, which I think is bougie. And I'm just like, what is this big, hard, like white plastic sort of semicircular thing here?
So our pole bag, yeah. I mean, I thought you might be going somewhere else when you were talking about bougie, but the hangout mode that we have as well. But yeah, so our pole bag.
Hang on. Did you say the what? Sorry,
hangout mode.
The hangout mode.
No, I'm talking about this.
It's the light
bloody
bar.
light bar. That's bougie. It's like you're gonna go hiking and then you get this like monster big light bar to hang up in your tent. Whoo-wee.
Yeah,
anyway,
over to you, Ross. We'll take you take it from there.
Oh, look, I mean, hard to top. Look, again, it's finding an additional use for something that you're going to have with you. We offer a separate stuff sack, I suppose, for your poles. Easy to, again, share amongst you when you're transporting them. Finding that additional feature, we have essentially a light diffuser, I suppose, along the base of the stuff sack, and two small press studs that clip into the roof of your inner. Have a head torch poking in the side of that, and it gives you a really, really nice sort of ambient lighting within your tent, almost like a strip light in there. And then, Lauren, if you want to select your color or strobing, that's up to you. But yes.
You like to sit in the dark corner of the office away from everyone else's light, so you'd like your diffused ambient.
Yes, but that also has a lot to do with people, which is why I like to go multi-day hiking in the wilderness with no other people, but strobe lighting included.
Look, I will say it's not. Lauren did describe that as being this enormous white stiff thing within the pack, but it's really not that. It's just a. It's
but
a stiffened panel.
If you're thinking
across
about
the back.
you go multi-day hiking, right? And you consider if someone's like, oh, a little light bar, and you're thinking multi-day hiking, it's not what you would consider. Like it's decent. It's like this beautiful, big, decent thing.
And if you think about sitting in your tent at night, a headlight shining down has always got a really bright light. This allows you just to diffuse a bit of light in the tent. Bit of a benefit. The only downside I consider clipping all that inside the tent is once you pack it up and you go to put it in the bag and then you realise your bag's still inside the tent. So just make sure you take the storage bags out before you roll your tent up.
But I want to know, what did you think I was going? Where did you think I was going when I said bougie?
Yes. So again, versatility, one of those sort of three things. So, the additional space, the ventilation, and versatility. So we have multiple sort of setup modes for our tents, one of which is something pretty unique called a Hangout Mode. I think our working name is the Tilting Turtle. But ultimately, if you have
that makes sense.
just the fly pitched by itself, the ability to use, and we have accessories poles that you can purchase, but a pair of trekking poles work really well. You can prop up the fly to become a multi-person shelter. It could be sheltering from a light shower if there's not much wind, more so perhaps in Australia from the sun. It's a pretty unique piece of kit. I honestly think that not many people would be using it in that sort of setting. But then I was also surprised to talk to one of our export managers who was on a multi-day trip through Iceland last year and loved the feature, middle of the day, light winds, able to set it up, a couple of lightweight Hellnox chairs underneath, and enjoy lunch in the middle of the day out of the sun. So
I got to say, I did demo I don't even know if our videos are live yet, but I did demo. I didn't put the poles in. I just kind of held it up to show how it would look. And the best way to describe it, I think, is to think of it as where a four-wheel driver or a camper would have an awning on the side of their car or take a gazebo. This is like having a lightweight version of that when you're hiking, and you could sleep under it too. So if it's a tropical environment, you need protection from the rain, but ventilation, you could pitch it up and just sort of sleep under it. Like it is pretty cool.
And I'm assuming, obviously with the Hellnox chairs, and I've done most of the videos of those and had a fair play, you can sort of just open up the frame and give it a shake and it puts itself together. And I'm assuming that if DAC have been involved in developing the frame of the tents, they're going to come together as easily as you would expect a Hellnox chair to as well. It's not like you're going to be spending 15 minutes trying to put the frame together.
Yeah, of course, shock corded tent poles. Again, probably industry standard really, and color coded then as well to a specific part of the tent. So really easy to pitch. Yeah, I mean, Ben can talk to that. He's pitched plenty in the last few days.
yeah, for sure. So your Telos and your Alto, obviously your ultralight tent range, you've got a semi-freestanding and a fully freestanding. Talk to us about the Ikos, which is on the poster behind you for those watching. Where does that sort of fit in? What's your target market there?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, a question that we've had a lot as well. We love the feature set that we've delivered with the Telos and the Alto. We are targeting, like we've talked about before, the top of that pyramid. There's a price to pay for that, but we're really happy with what we've delivered. We wanted to have something that offered maybe a little more value, but didn't lose some of those features and the benefits that we've really sort of hit the mark on. So that's where the Ikos, I think a Greek distributor corrected us and told us that we should pronounce it Ikos.
Okay,
so
we'll go with
that's
that.
Where the Ikos,
okay.
That's where the Ikos came in. So we could update, tweak some of the materials and drop out a couple of the features that we had without losing the fundamentals of space, ventilation and versatility in a product it's about 30% heavier, but it's 30% lighter on your wallet.
Okay.
Nice.
So I'm assuming that that's still, even though it's 30% heavier, it's still, say, a valid option for multi-day hiking or adventures where you do have to carry the tent if you're budget conscious.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, talked about it before, working in the outdoor industry previously, it feels like only 10 years ago, a 2.2 kilo tent was about the lightest weight out there. And that was awesome. And this is sort of the area that our Ikos now sits, even though for us, we're not chasing super lightweight. A couple of other things on it. It's also a totally symmetrical construction too. So you can actually pitch it either way, even easier to pitch. And it means that spaciously inside, they're massive. When you look at the floor space of our 3-person, you can easily fit 4 mummy-shaped sleeping mats in there, which is quite cool. Yeah. Even though for us, it's just a 3-person tent.
And do you still have the tension ridge architecture forms part of the Ikos as well?
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So same architecture, which allows us to have, large vents in the right places. It creates that space internally, higher walls to be able to access easily, and a lot of the things that I know you've touched on your videos, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
When are we getting those?
Well, they're
going to be, I think it's October time.
Okay.
September, October.
So we're 2023. They're not in the market. We're mid 2023 at the moment. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see them in the market. But yeah, awesome tents. I've answered a bunch of questions, but I don't have any more.
I've got a couple.
We've crept up to an hour almost. So
I've got a couple, and they're going to be quick because it has been a long podcast. But the first one is, you talked about your specialist, and your solo and your duo being very, very niche and not necessarily getting off the ground in the way that continuing a product in your range would need to. Given that there are brands like Z Packs, for example, now that are really popular, and those sort of style tents are becoming a lot more to the forefront, do you think you guys will ever dabble in bringing those back or producing something similar?
I think our shelter category will, as all categories do for us, will always evolve. You have to be relevant, and you have to be looking at innovations and where the market's leaning. So I don't know. I don't have any information to say yes, we're going to do this, or no, we're going to do that. Our team work a long way in advance, and like I say, always sort of keeping on top of things. There will always be customers that want a very specific type of product, and there's these cottage brands out there, cottage industry I should say, and these small brands out there that make some fantastic, really unique products. For us, we're trying to tick the box for as many people as we can, whilst delivering something that is still very, very high quality.
Yeah, well, I guess your tarp. Your tarps could also fill that same sort of category hole, I guess, with your inner tent and things as well.
This is
for the super ultralight, sort of the person that snaps their toothbrush in half and everything like that. Tarp camping in a sleeping bag is still an option, right? We have our Escapist tarp series at the moment. It's not a tent, it's not 2-layered like we talked about earlier, Ben, too. So there's options in our range already. Will they evolve? I have no doubt. When? I'm not sure.
Do you think your tent shelter category will ever venture into larger format, and I say that on the basis that your sleep systems have crept into
more of a car camping space,
compact options for car campers, even van life, or even four-wheel drivers who are trying to lighten the weight. Do you think your tent category will ever creep into that space?
Not in the near future is my feel. I think with the Ikos tent, we actually have a product that, again, when you look at the 3-person, when you see it come through, it's just massive inside. That's actually a pretty decent sort of family tent that covers almost a bit of both. I could definitely see myself putting it in the back of the car and driving down, the coast for a weekend sort of thing. So there's other areas as well. We don't have a real sort of 4-season alpine sort of option at the moment either. So there's plenty of space to look at, I suppose, with the category.
Well, watch this space. I'm really impressed with the tents.
Me too.
Having pitched them, they just work. They do what they say. Well, I haven't actually slept in them, but in terms of pitching it, they pitch as they say they do. Like all the seams line up with the poles. They just work. All the fabrics are taut. They're a great tent. So
I already have 2 hiking tents, but I will be getting a Citizen one.
Yeah,
that's
I've got so many
sure.
tents in the shed. I found one the other day. I forgot I had. Anyway, have you got any more questions for Ross?
I don't. Thank you, Ross.
Ross, have you got anything you want to add before we wind up on the tents? I think we've covered off a fair bit.
I think we've covered quite a lot, haven't we?
There'll be questions, and any questions around the what was it you said about the engineering.
If anybody
of the
wants to correct Ross, they'll do so in the
just
YouTube
pass
comments.
We'll just email address and you can deal with it.
Awesome.
All right. No, thanks for joining us, Ross. That was a great chat. Check out the Cedar Summit tents on our website. But we appreciate having you here with us.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Another episode done and dusted. Snowy's camping show.
Nice big juicy one. We haven't done a really long one for a while.
No,
so
we haven't. Yeah.
Thanks for sticking with us if you're still here.
Snowies.com.au if you want to check out all of these tents online, and keep an eye out later this year for the new Ikos. Is Ikos? Am I saying that right now?
Yep.
Ikos, yeah, which we'll get online as soon as we can.
Sweet.
Thanks
Catch
for
you
joining
later,
us.
guys.
See you next time.